We've definitely had a bit of an Elder Dragon bonanza over the last couple of episodes. First, we encountered Inagami, the Elder Dragon that can summon nature and greenery from the soil. Next, we took on Harudomergu, the Elder of metal and inorganic material. This next one's going to be a little interesting in the fact that it's less isolated for a monster in the Isolated Species report, in that it also appears in the desert zones. But the sheer power and mostly the fact that it's tied to the Interceptor's base zone means that we're going to be looking at a real force of nature today, something that we should be afraid of. We're going to be in the big leagues. We're going to be fighting every Zenith ancillary effect ever, having our healing disabled. We're going to be pushed and pulled around the battlefield and fighting the force of gravity itself. I'd like to welcome you to the pinnacle of Elder Dragons. Welcome to Zenith Rukodiora. Zenith Ruko was the first Elder Dragon Zenith to be added to the series, and it was clear that the old devs wanted this elite monster class to be celebrated and feared with their first Zenith representative. It was even foreshadowed in previous updates, where hunters were treated to a sneak peek of Zenith Roar from the Emperor himself, Guanzarumu, showing that Elder Dragons could ascend past the basic boundaries of normal monsters, and Zenith Ruko brings that out in full force. We'll begin where all fights do, your entrance. You'll be greeted by the vicious, jagged wings of the Elder. You'll notice that the phalange, those bones in between the wings, have been reduced compared to the base species, and they're much more wicked and venomous looking. This is a dragon that manipulates force and conducts itself accordingly, and it starts out with an appropriate introduction. A circle of earth begins to bubble around from Rukodiora until hundreds and hundreds of rocks burst out of the sand. It will float around Ruko as it takes to the sky and slowly glides towards you. This is an attack that you'll see a couple of times from the get-go, but it's always guaranteed to come out at the start of the fight regardless of level. Now, the attack itself only triggers when you're basically under the dragon, and from here the rocks will slam down. The tough part about avoiding this attack is that sometimes Ruko will slam down fast, and sometimes it will delay after the rocks hit the earth. You'll just have to rely on your own personal reaction time to avoid this attack here. If you screw it up, you'll get blasted into the rock circle for a double hit, and if you negate it, Zenith Wind effect by the way, you'll have to wait for Ruko to change its stance to avoid an additional roll. From there, the gauntlet is thrown and we go full force into the powerhouse of this Elder. We're going to be talking about the attacks, of course, starting with the most common one. Personally for me, it's this wing flap attack. However, there's the other elephant in the room we have to talk about before we get there. Ruko has its own status effect, known as magnetism, meaning as if you're afflicted with it through ranged or melee attacks, you will now end up being pushed and pulled depending on the attack accordingly. The reason that I mention this is that a lot of hunters now have access to anti-magnetism food skills, and I personally never delved into that side of the mechanics when I was playing through the game proper. I raw dogged the entirety of my Zenith experience outside of SR skills, so the modern day private server player who has access to infinite rare consumables that took months to acquire won't appreciate the disadvantage we go into the fight with. Nonetheless, the moving of your hunter can work in your favour, so you can adapt around it, and Rukodiora gives that adaptation in spades. One final mechanic of this before we get onto the actual attacks is that there will be certain magnetic pulses of the monster throughout certain animations. Those will allow you to trigger evasive skills such as Stylish Assault. Consider rolling some of the pulses even if they don't damage you to build up those gauges. Attacks then, starting with the wing flap. You'll be pulled right underneath Ruko and hit with 2 Zenith Wind Blasts. They're incredibly simple to block or roll and telegraphed from a mile away. Of course, mistakes happen, and if you're struck by it, you'll be blown away and magnetized into spires that form from the ground. Now, if you do get hit by this will also showcase the brand new affliction Zenith Dragonblight. We've had our encounters with all the other elements but one up to this point, and it's here where we can see this guy appear. Zenith Dragonblight is a frustrating affliction if you aren't playing with adrenaline health levels, and if you are, you'll be killed before the attack can afflict you with the effect anyways. For those of us who play at full health, it fully disables all healing. Vampirism, potions, max potions, you name it. All will be nullified. If anything, all will be reversed. If you choose to drink a potion while under this effect, health will be deducted from you instead. It's similar to Waterblight, however, in that it won't cause you immediate death like the others, but I would personally recommend to bump up your resistance to 55 just so you can get the benefit of any healing that you may have on your set. The second attack to talk about is this cannon shot. A line of magnetism will pull you in front of the Elder, and a big old orb flies out after a moment. The timing of this I've never really been able to pin down unless you have eyes on the size of the sphere forming between the wings. It's about a half second or so, and there are minuscule frames present for the attack, so it is very easy to dodge or block. Eventually you'll get a feeling for it and learn how to dodge or block accordingly, but for now I'd say just see if you can pay attention to the size of the projectile. Next up on the docket is the Flash Slam. This is another attack you'll see with a lot of regularity. Ruko in this animation will take to the air and push you slightly away, fly a bit low towards you, and then will slam down. Your tell for the slam down is to dodge when the magnetic field around Ruko flashes a second time, and again this can be dodged or blocked as you like. Two final attacks to cover at this level, both being leftovers from G-Rank Hardcore Rukodiora. The first is where the Zenith will tense up and rise up into the air. You can dodge away the moment you see the monster start to move, as if you'll fail, you'll get thrown up into the air and juggle with a follow-up explosion. Nasty attack at higher levels for sure. Specifically what will happen is Ruko will tense its body and then run around in a circle to jump up into the air. The moment you see any type of movement is when you begin to respond. Finally will be another juggle attack. You'll get pulled into a gravity well in front of Ruko, and after a moment it'll jump into the air. You'll have to wait a beat after it jumps into the air, as the ground is due to erupt but won't do so until Ruko points its wings forward in the air. Again, another attack with tough timing because visibility will be very poor, but it's a pretty consistent rhythm once you learn to recognize the attack that's coming out. After the ground explodes, you may wish to dodge to the side as Ruko will slam back down with a very deceptive hitbox on this lunge. There's definitely a lot of tools in the arsenal of Zenith Ruko to start with. The G-Rank 200 version is a lot to take in. Hopefully this should give you an idea to identify the main threats and your option to respond, as these will be continuously present throughout all of the different levels. Of course, it's from here is where we move on to G-Rank 400. The main change with Ruko comes with the Dragon Beam. Even in the standard animation, this attack is present on the G-Rank 200 version, but it only really becomes significant now, because the width of the beam will be double. This will not only hit you when you don't expect it to, it will also hit multiple times rather than one big wallop. You'll also be treated to two new beam iterations, all of which share the same effect, so if you're caught in the attack, you're not going to be thrown away, you're just going to be shredded on the spot. Those of you who may have watched the Toricless video might see this as a bit familiar. The two new beam iterations have one where Ruko will charge and sweep it wide to his left, and then another to the right where he'll sweep once normally, and then charge up for a second time for about a 120-degree arc. This second one is the real danger here, because your safest bet was really going to be behind him because of how much the dragon moves. These brand new beams aren't all, however. G-Rank Hardcore Rukodiora from a much earlier update has decided to rear its head for a loner attack, and in our classic Frontier fashion it is a devastating one-shot. In this attack you'll be surrounded by a giant pillar of magnetism, and constantly pulled into the centre. Here you'll have to roll or dash for your life to get out before it erupts. Now this attack makes an appearance mostly at G-Rank 400, and of course with the level that you're at, extreme styles and roll cancelling the magnetism, you best hope that you aren't close to the centre of the cylinder for a chance at survival. The amount of suction that this pillar has is obscene, and you're going to have to run for your life the moment it starts to happen. No armor skills prevent you from being one-shot by this, you'll be thrown up into the air and your health will disappear even before a life powder can get in and save you. Of course we move on to G-Rank 600 here and nothing changes as per usual. However, it's here where we talk about the gear. It is all pretty standard, seeing things like strong attack and various sharpness skills and what have you, but there is a weird inclination towards the skill Lavish Attack. Now Lavish Attack is an interesting little critter of a skill and one I wouldn't mind seeing in mainline maybe toned down a bit, but essentially it would double your sharpness usage to give you 100 true roll. It's a niche but powerful skill and worth it on things like magnet spikes, of course, and greatsword, things that are relatively slow and don't consume too much sharpness over a hunt. With this, however, we're going to approach G-Rank 800, and we'll have to discuss the ramifications of breaking the Zenith part here. Unsurprisingly, it's the wings, and once broken, you'll no longer be treated to Zenith wind effects. Ruko will also slow down to a crawl, and becomes essentially a sitting duck. If you remember the Zenith Plesioth video and the amount that its speed reduced when you broke its face, think on that sort of level. You're not going to be seeing as many magnetic pulses anymore, and a lot more effects will be reduced. With the length of weapons in Frontier, of course, you'll be surprised about how easy it is to hit those wings. Even a greatsword or sword and shield doing various spinning attacks can perfectly clip those wings to do damage to them. Now at G-Rank 800, attack-wise, the only new move is this one-shot. Ruko will tense up and summon gravity energy below you and around it in an area. Its wings will seem to sort of form this M shape. Now, the attack comes out when it bursts and it will catch you in an unblockable bear trap. where your hunter is spiked up and thrown to the floor. The damage of this attack is obscene and will likely fully cart you without any sort of assistance. But to get the dodge off on this is to pay attention to the wings for the tail. When they start to flex, that's your cue to evade. They'll be static for a moment, and when they start to move again, that is when you dodge. It is imperative that you learn this and combine it with all of your previous knowledge. That attack can come out quite fast when you're not expecting it, so avoiding it is a must. Here, there's not really much else to say. Covering all of the moves of Ruko is the main thing, and it is a hell of a spectacle. An elder that can take you by surprise, but really once you learn him, he's not that bad. Some pretty friendly hitboxes here as well. At least he doesn't have his rocks floating around impermanently anymore, because who the hell decided that was a good idea? This concludes, I believe, the Elder Dragon segment of the Isolated Monsters report. Next up are the final two. If you've been paying attention, you'll know which ones, and one of them is my favourite of all time. Thanks so much for watching. Sira out.